Christmas night turned into a nightmare when I saw a man staring at me from the snow-covered backyard. I followed his footprints to the shed and found him waiting inside with a sledgehammer, smiling like he'd been waiting for me. On Christmas Day in 2018, my girlfriend and I headed out to visit her parents. It was the first time I was meeting her family, and I was genuinely looking forward to it. Christmas has always been my favorite holiday. I've always loved the festive atmosphere and holiday spirit. However, after spending around 3 or 4 hours there, I started to feel the urge to leave. My social battery was running on empty. Being around new people for an extended period can really wear me out. I'm not exactly sure why that is. I've been that way since I was a little kid. It's not that I dislike people or don't enjoy good company, but I'm more of a keep to myself type. Or maybe it's better to say I have a small circle of people I deeply care about and interact with regularly. Being surrounded by unfamiliar faces and soaking in all that attention just wasn't something I was used to. As we were getting ready to head out, we suddenly realized that during our 4 or 5 hours inside, a serious amount of snow had fallen. I knew it had been snowing, but I didn't expect it to come down that heavily. An extra 3 to 5 inches had blanketed the roads, which were already in rough shape to begin with. Since we lived just over an hour away, and the road conditions were clearly too dangerous, we had to settle in for the night. There wasn't much of a choice. The storm didn't seem like it was going to let up anytime soon. Driving in that kind of weather just wasn't an option. My girlfriend seemed pretty pleased about staying overnight. Me? Not so much. Still, I didn't want to complain. I was just happy I was under a safe and warm roof with my girlfriend. Plus, I got to spend some more time with her family, and I really got to know her dad some more. We bonded over similar interests that we both had, like hunting and basketball, which I thought was pretty cool. Her parents were very nice and welcoming to me, and they prepared a great meal for myself and everyone else, which I was thankful for. Maybe it wouldn't be so bad after all. I couldn't have been more wrong to think that, though. It was getting late, and everybody was venturing off to bed. My girlfriend Grace got us some blankets, and we went to the spare bedroom that we were staying in for the night. We turned on a random horror movie, and she fell asleep less than halfway through the movie. I, on the other hand, wasn't tired at all. All of a sudden, I heard this weird noise that sounded like it came from outside. It almost sounded like smaller-sized tree branches were dragging across the bedroom window. I really didn't think a whole lot about it at first, but it definitely caught me off guard and raised my suspicion. I almost got up out of bed to try and take a look outside, but Grace was lying in my arms, and I didn't want to wake her up for nothing. I think I just assumed that I was overthinking. A bit of time passed by, and I was finally getting sleepy, but I really had to use the bathroom. I got up out of bed slowly and quietly as possible to ensure I didn't wake Grace up, and I did my business in the bathroom, and I lied back down in bed after. As I was drifting asleep, I heard this disturbing, scream come from outside. It was loud enough to wake me up and startle me, but not enough to wake Grace up. I got up, and I looked out the window, and I kid you not, I could see a person that was standing in the middle of the backyard looking at me. I wasn't so sure they could see me, but I didn't weigh it out as an option. I didn't really care anyways if they could see me, or not, to tell the truth. My gut told me something was terribly wrong, though. You know when you get that gut feeling of dread? It's an unexplainable feeling, but that's how I felt. I tried to wake my girlfriend up, but she's a heavy sleeper. So after a few attempts, I gave up. Stupidly enough, I ran outside by myself to go and see what the hell was happening. And the person I saw only a few minutes ago was gone. They were completely out of sight. I then spotted the footsteps in the snow that looked like it led all the way to the shed in the backyard. I followed them cautiously, but quickly at the same time. Then I heard the scratching sound as I was approaching the shed. It almost sounded like the way a knife sounds when scraped against metal. Well, even so, I continued moving forward. As I got up closer to the front door of the shed, I noticed that it was cracked open. I opened it some more and peeked my head through ever so slowly, with my heart practically beating out of my chest now. And that's when I saw the most disturbing thing I will ever see in my entire life. That same man from earlier was standing right there, no more than 10 feet away from me. He had a sledgehammer in his hand and was approaching me now. I stood there in shock for probably a few seconds, but I screamed for help as loud as I could immediately. I started to run back to the house, and he began chasing me. When I turned around, though, right before I got to the front door, he was out of sight, almost like he vanished out of thin air. I didn't question him much. I was just ready to get the hell inside to safety. I ran upstairs in a panic to Grace, and I told her what happened. She started freaking out when I told her even more than I was, and we woke her family up and told them as well about what happened. Thankfully, they have cameras up surrounding the perimeter of the house, so Grace's dad played back the footage so they could see what we were talking about. Unfortunately, I didn't pick up the man's facial features at all, and it wasn't any help in identifying the man. I barely got a good look at him either. All I can really say is that he was average height, that he had medium-length black curly hair, and was creepy as fuck. For some reason, her parents didn't want me to call the police, though, and I think they tried to convince me that it was some sort of prank, and that we shouldn't be worried about it. I don't know how the hell they could believe that, but I thought that was pretty weird. Something about that didn't seem right to me. You would think that if someone was on your property with a weapon, and they chased your daughter's boyfriend in the middle of the night, that something would probably kick in inside of you. That was definitely way more than just a silly prank. The guy was gonna fucking kill me, for Christ's sakes. I skipped out on going to Grace's parents' house every Christmas since, and I've been running out of excuses. But I really don't care to go back. But first, did you know that 98% of people who watch my videos aren't subscribed? That means you. And yes, I am speaking specifically to you. Probably aren't. So now would be a great time to leave a like on the video and subscribe. Anyhow, on Christmas Eve last year, I was relaxing on the couch in our living room, enjoying some rare quiet time to myself. My two boys, only 5 and 8 years old at the time, were already tucked into bed, and my wife had fallen into a peaceful sleep. With a couple of uninterrupted hours ahead of me, I figured I'd make the most of it. I flipped through the channels and landed on some random Christmas movie, letting it play softly in the background. To set the perfect cozy mood, I turned on the lights on our Christmas tree and made a cup of hot chocolate. I wasn't really paying much attention to the movie, I was mostly just scrolling through Facebook and playing games on my phone. I remember feeling completely at peace. The fireplace was crackling, leftovers from dinner were still warm in the fridge, and Christmas morning was just around the corner. It felt like life couldn't get any better. Then, completely out of nowhere, I heard a loud thud coming from the opposite side of the house. It startled me at first, but I brushed it off, thinking it was probably nothing. But then the sound happened again. Curious and a bit on edge, I checked the front living room window and then the kitchen window above the sink, scanning the yard and the sides of the house. I peeked into my son's bedroom, they share a room, and found them both fast asleep. I checked in on my wife as well, and she hadn't stirred. Still, that noise. What the hell was it? I heard it 3 or 4 times, and each time it sounded like someone was pounding on something with a closed fist. I slipped on my slippers and stepped outside for a quick look around. Nothing, no footprints, no movement, no one there. Maybe it was all in my head, I thought. Just some random house-settling noises and an overactive imagination. I decided to let it go and head back inside. But as I slid the patio door shut and reached to lock it, I heard a scream. It sounded like a child. Right away, I knew it was Luke, who was my youngest boy. I wasn't sure where the screaming was coming from, but I ran to the boy's room and exploded through the door and turned the light on. Logan, who was my other son, woke up in a panic, and Luke was missing. The bedroom window was wide open. I asked Logan where he was, and he said he had no idea. I told Logan to run to Mom in our room and to let her know that Luke was missing and to call the police. I grabbed my 9mm handgun and I rushed outside and ran to my backyard, calling out for Luke's name. And thankfully, he was able to let out a scream. We live out in the country, and we have a huge yard that sits on about 15 acres of mostly dense woods and trails. I followed the sound of his scream, and it led me to the woods. I found myself chasing after him, just trying my absolute best to find him. I screamed and screamed for him, but eventually he stopped screaming back. That's when my panic really set in, and I swear to you, I thought I was going to have a heart attack. I kept searching for him, and after a few minutes, I heard something that sounded like a person stepping through sticks and leaves. And then I heard a sound of what sounded like someone taking a big gasp and trying to hold their breath. I looked all around me, and I turned the flashlight on. I didn't have it on up until this point because I didn't want to give off my position. I knew my son was out there with someone who was trying to kidnap him. And I knew that I knew my woods better than anybody. And I knew he was still out there, and that they were close by. I must have did a 364, or 5 different times, looking all around, until I finally spotted what looked like to be someone laying on the ground. All I could see was a shadow. Almost as soon as I pointed the flashlight at it and took a few steps closer, I then saw, in fact, that it was a man. He was lying on top of my son, and he was suffocating him. The man ran off, and I ran to my son Luke. He was lying there, borderline unconscious, and I picked him up and ran home and got him inside. The police were already there by the time we got back to the house, and Luke had to go to the hospital. He turned out to be okay, but he had bruises all over his body and scratches on his neck and face. My son almost and very well could have died from asphyxiation. As for the man who kidnapped him, they never caught him. I gave the police the best description of him, but he's still out there somewhere. He was lucky I didn't shoot him in the fucking head. Sometimes I wish I would have. Luke said he thought the man was me, and that he was dressed up with a ski mask, and somehow the man convinced him to unlock the window and to go with him. My son is probably going to remember this for the rest of his life. I know my wife, and I will. This happened on Christmas Eve, 3 years ago, when I was 23. At the time, I was living alone in a house I was renting. I had spent the entire afternoon with some family and didn't get back home until later in the evening. I was completely wiped out. My sleep schedule had been a mess, and the previous week at work had been especially stressful. All I wanted was to crash. Normally, I'd hop in the shower, get into bed, and throw on some Netflix or YouTube to wind down. But that night, I was so exhausted that I skipped the usual routine. I just checked my phone for a few minutes and went straight to bed. I had to be up early for Christmas morning anyway. If I had to guess, I was probably asleep just after 8 p.m. Only a few hours later, I was jolted awake by the sound of footsteps coming from upstairs. For context, my bedroom was located in the basement of the house. I'm a really light sleeper, so the noise woke me up almost immediately, and I instantly knew something wasn't right. The panic hit me fast. Someone had broken into the house. My first instinct was to call the police, but when I grabbed my phone, I saw I had no signal. Reception in my basement is hit or miss, and this just happened to be one of those unlucky moments. I rushed to the laundry room, which was just a room away from my bedroom. In there, I grabbed a steel pipe, maybe about a foot long, that I kept nearby for emergencies. I wasn't eager to use it, but I knew I had to be prepared, just in case. With no better option, I tried to hide behind some clothes hanging in the laundry room. It wasn't exactly the best hiding spot, but at the time, it was the only thing I could think of. I must have called the police a dozen times, and each time it would ring only once. And it would make this beeping noise my phone would make when it had no signal. I was starting to get pretty pissed off, and I let my anger get a hold of me. The noise upstairs continued, and by now, it had escalated to more than just footsteps. I kept hearing this noise that sounded like someone was pounding on something. Then everything got eerily quiet for only a couple of minutes. Whoever broke into my house was now trying to make their way downstairs. I must have locked the door, though, because whoever it was wasn't able to get the door open. I have a bad habit of making sure that the doors are always locked. I'm not so sure how bad of a habit it is, though, considering it potentially saved my life. The man started yelling and screaming, but I couldn't make out what he was saying. It didn't even sound like he was speaking English. He then knocked on the door, and then he attempted to break it down by what sounded like him kicking it over and over. Luckily, he wasn't able to get the door open. I pretty much sat there and waited for the nightmare to be over with. I waited until I felt like he was gone, before I even thought about walking upstairs. I probably waited for over half an hour after the last sound I heard from upstairs. I finally worked up the courage to walk up the stairs and look around the house for him. I was just waiting for him to pop out at any moment, and I would have had to fight for my life. But he never did. He was gone. The only thing he left behind was a piece of paper that he taped to the fridge that said, and I quote, "I'll be back," with a bunch of smiley faces on it. I didn't care too much for his little threat, and I called the police to make a report on what happened. I had absolutely nothing on the man, though. I didn't know what he looked like at all, and I had no idea of his age or anything that could even give the slightest detail of the man. So, obviously, there wasn't much the police could do except reassure me and boost my confidence by telling me that everything would be okay and that they will catch him sooner or later. It really freaked me out too, because even still to this day, I have no idea how he got inside. There were no signs of a break-in or anything. I had an incident that happened exactly a year later on Christmas Eve as well. I wasn't home. I was actually at my girlfriend's house, visiting with her family, when I received a notification on my phone on my Ring doorbell app that said somebody was at my front door. I opened up the notification right away, and there was a man on my front porch trying to get my attention or break into my house or something. I know deep down in my heart that I had to have been the same guy that broke into my house the year before. He had this huge, creepy smile on his face, but he seemed to have been confused by the Ring camera I had, like he hadn't seen one before or something. I then yelled at him and told him the police were on the way, and that if he doesn't leave, he's going to be arrested and to never come back again. Well, surprisingly, it worked when I threatened him, because he ran off and I haven't heard or seen anything from him since. I called the police and I was able to give them a description finally, but still, since the man was gone by the time the police arrived, there wasn't much they could do. Now, every year around Christmas especially, I get paranoid that he's going to come back. I'm set to move in about 3 months though, so hopefully I can finally start feeling safe in my own home. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more amazing video. Turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any updates. All right, that's it for today. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.